These 2 hours, the presenters on every news channel were saying injured but expected to make a full recovery, and I have no idea why, but it made me so angry.
Princess Diana's death did not just bring tears to Britain. It was an earthquake that tore through the heart of the royal family and left a scar that never healed in the Spencer family itself. In that fateful moment of 1990, it wasn't just a symbol of compassion that fell. It was a daughter, a mother, and above all, a little sister who was gone forever. Nearly 3 decades have passed, yet that pain still burns quietly in the hearts of those left behind. And now, at the age of 60, Lady Sarah McCorquodale, the eldest sister who had remained silent before the media for many years, has suddenly broken her silence. For the first time, in a documentary commemorating Princess Diana, Sarah's voice trembled as she spoke of the fateful night that took the life of the sister she loved but never fully understood. And in that moment of remembrance, Sarah posed a question that sent shockwaves through the public. Why wasn't Diana wearing a seatbelt, a detail that seemed trivial, yet when raised by someone of blood relation, it struck like a slap in the face of conclusions long considered closed? That question revived a host of controversies, conspiracy theories, and long-buried secrets. What seemed like a close, sisterly bond turned out to be filled with unspoken tension, wrong choices, overlooked signs, and a series of events that led to a horrifying tragedy, and all are being brought back into the light by the very woman who once walked beside Diana's coffin. And this time, she's no longer staying silent. Among the survivors of the earthquake named Princess Diana, Lady Sarah McCorquodale is a quiet name that cannot be ignored. Born on March 19, 1955, the eldest daughter of the Spencer family, a long-standing aristocratic house closely tied to Windsor Castle, Sarah lived in the shadows of tragedy, but carried memories that no one else could understand. She was 6 years older than Diana, and the first to witness the rise and fall of the people's princess. But behind the composed demeanor she displayed to the public lay a deeply personal story, a secret only those closest dared to whisper. It was one decision in Sarah's past that inadvertently pushed Diana toward her fateful turning point. Lady Sarah and Diana grew up at Park House, a grand estate located on the Queen's Land in Sandringham. With its splendid appearance, but the house had long symbolized wealth, power, and aristocratic order. But behind those thick oak-paneled walls and long, red-carpeted hallways was a household quietly falling apart. Everything changed suddenly in 1969 when their parents, John Spencer and Frances Roche, officially divorced. It was not only a scandal among the upper class, but also a psychological shock for the 4 Spencer children, especially for Diana, who was just 8 at the time. Frances left with her new lover, leaving the 4 children in the care of John Spencer. Their mother gone, the house turned cold. In a single night, the childhood world of the Spencer siblings was upended. Diana, sensitive by nature, withdrew into herself, but Sarah did not. At just 14 years old, she was forced to grow up quickly, becoming a pillar in place of the mother who had vanished. It was Sarah who comforted Diana each night after the lights went out, who took her little sister out to momentarily forget the heavy atmosphere at home, and who shielded Diana from the strict, often cold demeanor of their father. Things grew worse when a woman named Rain entered their lives. Rain, a sharp and ambitious countess, became John Spencer's second wife. She arrived with a controlling attitude and sweeping changes, transforming Althorpe into a place that no longer felt like home to the children. In Diana's eyes, Rain was an invader. But to Sarah, Rain was a political equation. With the pragmatism of an eldest sister, Sarah chose to mediate, not affectionate, but not confrontational either. And that became one of the first cracks in their relationship. Diana needed someone to share her fury, to rise up with her. But Sarah, with a more grounded mindset, chose the path of compromise. Their bond remained strong, but a silent distance began to form. Yet, above all, Sarah was still the person Diana trusted the most. As she grew older and became entangled in a web of expectations, social norms, and calculated aristocratic relationships, Diana often turned to Sarah for advice. Whenever a new suitor came along, whenever a cruel article was published, Diana would call her sister. They weren't just siblings, they were survivors in a system where emotions were often buried beneath masks of perfection. But it was precisely from within that close sisterly bond that a seemingly harmless decision by Lady Sarah would open a path no one could have predicted. It began when Sarah started dating a prominent man from the upper class, a man who was being eyed by the royal family as a potential marriage candidate, Prince Charles. During a hunting trip at Sandringham, Sarah, with her sharp features and confident demeanor, caught Charles's attention. The two had a brief romance that drew heavy media coverage. But Sarah, known for her candor, once told the press I wouldn't marry Charles if he were the dustman or the King of England. That statement displeased the royal family, and at the same time, led Charles to turn his gaze towards someone else, Sarah's younger sister. Shy, emotional, and unassuming. It was Sarah who introduced Diana to Charles during a family gathering. A simple gesture, without calculation, but one that would ignite one of the most talked about tragedies in the history of the British monarchy. In 1907, what seemed like an ordinary pheasant shoot at the Althorpe estate became the turning point that forever changed Princess Diana's life. And the one who opened that door was none other than Lady Sarah McCorquodale, her own sister, who had once been her shield and, unwittingly, the one who led her into a marriage the world would call a fairy tale, yet one filled with unimaginable sorrow. That morning, Prince Charles, at 29 years old at the time, arrived at Althorpe in traditional hunting attire, stepping into the misty fields of rural Northamptonshire with the confidence of a man born to rule. Sarah, having had a brief relationship with the prince, remained the gracious hostess. But it wasn't Sarah who made Charles pause that day. It was a 16-year-old girl, standing timidly on the edge of the gathering, with large, admiring eyes. Diana Spencer. No one paid much attention to that first glance, but it was the moment that would mark the beginning of a lifelong tragedy. When Diana smiled and bowed her head to the charming prince, she could not have known that fate had just turned its page. Charles, freshly broken up with Sarah and under pressure to marry, seemed to see in Diana something safe, a naive, pure girl from aristocracy, and most importantly, not Camilla. At that time, Sarah had no suspicions about the relationship. She had told Time magazine in 1978 after her split with Charles, "I wouldn't marry a man I didn't love, whether he were a dustman or the King of England." That statement was more than a display of Sarah's strong personality. It was a slap in the face of a monarchy where love always took second place to politics. Sarah had stepped away from the game. But Diana, whether by accident or the dreams of youth, stepped in with a heart full of pink-tinted illusions in the belief that she could become a happy princess. When Diana turned 19 after just 13 meetings, she accepted the proposal from a man 13 years her senior one, who still pined for a married woman named Camilla Parker Bowles. Sarah supported the relationship, even attending and helping with the wedding. But behind the blessings, the truth was Sarah had underestimated the darkness behind the glittering lights. Sarah had known Camilla. She had witnessed the whispered conversations, the knowing glances between Charles and that woman. But perhaps she believed, like so many in the Spencer family, that once married, Charles would end the relationship. They did not know or refused to believe that Camilla had never left Charles's heart, and Diana's marriage was simply a mask to cover that fact. Sarah, who had witnessed Diana's lonely nights at Clarence House, who took her sister's calls whenever she felt suffocated in the golden cage called the palace, gradually realized she was not just a witness. She was the one who brought Diana to that starting line. And though no one said it aloud, it was that introduction long ago that had unwittingly turned Diana into a pawn in the royal family's game of power. Even worse, Sarah realized the truth too late. When Diana was caught in the whirlpool of media frenzy, forced to live as a flawless icon, and broken by the coldness of the man she had once loved with all her heart, Sarah could only stand on the sidelines, helpless. She had tried to talk to Charles. She had tried to convince Diana to endure it for the sake of appearances. But love cannot survive when one heart was never fully in the game. Diana, with her strong will and sensitive soul, slowly shattered before her sister's eyes. Within the Spencer family, whispers circulated that Sarah had once blamed herself for not seeing the truth of that marriage sooner. But at the time, who could have dared intervene? Charles was the Prince of Wales. Camilla was an open secret no one touched. And Diana, the little sister Sarah had once cradled in her arms when the storms of family life raged, had become the central figure in a royal tragedy where no one dared speak the truth. Princess Diana's death did not just bring tears to Britain. It was an earthquake tearing apart the very heart of the royal family and leaving an unhealed scar within the Spencer household itself. At that fateful moment in 1997, not only did a beacon of kindness fall, but also a daughter, a mother, and above all, a younger sister who was gone forever. Nearly 3 decades have passed, yet that pain continues to smolder in the hearts of those left behind him. And now, at age 60, Lady Sarah McCorquodale, the eldest sister who remained silent to the media for many years, has unexpectedly broken her silence. In a documentary commemorating Princess Diana, Sarah's voice trembled for the first time as she recalled the fateful night that took the life of the sister she loved, yet never fully understood. But in that moment of remembrance, Sarah dropped a bombshell. Why wasn't Diana wearing a seatbelt? A detail that seemed trivial, but when posed by a blood relative struck like a slap to conclusions we thought were long closed. That question sparked a wave of renewed controversy, conspiracy theories, and long-buried secrets. What appeared to be a close sisterly bond turned out to be fraught with hidden tension. Mistaken decisions, ignored warning signs, and a chain of events leading to a horrific tragedy now all being re-examined by the very woman who once walked beside Diana's coffin. And this time, she refuses to stay silent. Sarah, driven by her protective instincts, once advised her sister to hide her suffering and not expose it to the media. But Diana, by then trusting no one, chose to speak out. Through books, interviews, and secret recordings, the mask of palace life began to crumble. And it was then that Sarah realized that her silence had been nothing but complicity. The truth about the love triangle between Charles, Diana, and Camilla didn't just shatter a marriage. It destroyed trust, upended the royal family's image, and most tragically left Diana living in loneliness until her very last breath. Over all those years, Sarah was the one who witnessed every crack in her sister's marriage, every failed attempt at reconciliation, every moment Diana yearned to escape, only to be pulled back in. Sarah's initial support, born of familial love, inadvertently became the first piece of the tragedy puzzle, and that realization has tormented her ever since. A small choice, an innocuous pheasant hunt, a sisterly nod, and from that point on, nothing could ever go back. On July 29, 1981, the world's gaze turned to St. Paul's Cathedral, where Princess Diana, radiant in her bridal gown, walked down the aisle of what was hailed the wedding of the century. Over 750 million people, from London row houses to remote cities in Asia, held their breath as the 19-year-old prepared to become wife to Prince Charles, heir to the British throne. Yet behind that 7-meter train of lace and the jubilant church bells, a heart was beginning to fracture. Diana entered marriage with innocence and hope. She believed in love. She believed in the royal dream. But what she didn't know or chose not to see was that Charles had never let go of his relationship with Camilla Parker Bowles. Even on the eve of their wedding, when Diana deserved comfort and affection, Charles slipped away. The whispers between him and Camilla found their way into the heart of his new wife, like cold, piercing daggers. The Bride of England tried her hardest. Diana hoped, she endured. But cracks appeared in the marriage within months of the wedding. Camilla was never the past, she was the present. The ghost-haunting, frigid dinners in palaces, public tours where Charles avoided Diana's gaze, and silent smiles Diana feigned at receptions while her heart broke. It wasn't until 1992, when the Camilla Gate tapes were leaked, that the world truly grasped the depth of Diana's betrayal. Those intimate and humiliating conversations between Charles and Camilla flooded the media, revealing Charles's shocking remark that he wished to be reincarnated as Camilla's tampon so I could be with her all the time. The revulsion felt by the British public wasn't just about the crude content, it was the realization that the man they revered had never really loved the woman they adored. Diana became a symbol and a prisoner of that symbol. Imprisoned by the palace's cold rule, where emotions were crushed and mistakes magnified. Outwardly, she was the people's princess. Inside, she was a woman drowning in despair. She fought not only against her husband's indifference, but also against a far harsher enemy herself. Postnatal depression, a condition few in the royal circle dared to admit to engulf Diana after William's birth. In an interview, she said she felt invisible, swallowed by a giant system with no place for weakness. And when things spiraled out of control, Diana turned to extreme ways just to survive. Bulimia, the eating disorder, became her silent, terrifying companion for years. Diana would gorge and then purge, as if trying to rid herself of all the pressure and self-loathing. Nobody in the palace understood or wanted to understand the agony. All they saw was a princess acting erratically, unpredictably, and controversially. Worse still, Diana harmed herself physically on multiple occasions. In one episode of despair, she threw herself down the stairs while pregnant with William, hoping to grab Charles's attention. But instead of a comforting embrace, she got cold silence and distant stares. In another incident, she confessed to using a razor to cut her arms in the bathroom. Physical pain felt more bearable than the emptiness in her heart. None of these intimate struggles made headlines at the time. The public only saw Diana in dazzling gowns, flashing regal smiles, exuding poise. But behind the gloss was a woman slowly erasing herself day by day, hour by hour in the indifference of the man she once loved. Princess Diana was not a weak woman. On the contrary, she possessed extraordinary inner strength. Yet even the most courageous soul needs to be loved and understood. When there was no one left to listen, she chose to speak out to the world. Through candid interviews, books like Diana, Her True Story, and secret recordings, the mask of royal life was gradually stripped away, revealing the cruelty of that so-called fairy tale marriage. From an emblem of royal love, Diana became a symbol of resistance. But the price she paid was enormous. She sacrificed her youth, her mental health, and even her life in a battle where the enemy was not merely Camilla or Charles, but a system that would not allow a woman to be vulnerable, nor a princess to be sad. This is no longer just Diana's personal story. It is the story of everyone who once believed in fairy tales and awoke to tears. And Lady Sarah, who once thought she had helped her sister achieve that princess dream, can only watch in anguish as Diana was suffocated by that very pristine white wedding dress. The gown remained, but the princess was gone. Amid the crushing suffering of a shattered marriage, under the harsh, scrutinizing gaze of royalty and the media, Diana stood strong. But she did more than endure. She shone in a way no one expected. From a betrayed aristocratic girl imprisoned within gilded, frigid walls, Diana stepped into the light to become a global humanitarian icon. She came to be known as the people's princess not because of her title, but because she dared to do what neither the monarchy nor society dared to do. And standing silently behind her on that journey, supporting and safeguarding her, was the sister 6 years her senior, Lady Sarah McCorquodale. Diana did not choose to be a victim. She chose to be a voice. When the world still recoiled in fear from HIV/AIDS, when the media painted those infected as living ghosts, Diana, no gloves, no barrier, reached out and touched a patient's hand at Middlesex Hospital. That touch, seemingly small, stunned the world. Reporters leaped on the story. Medical professionals were stunned, and the public wept. Because in an era of prejudice and fear, one gesture from Diana shattered the invisible wall between them and us. Sarah, who knew her sister better than anyone, understood that this was not a publicity stunt. It was Diana's very nature to stand with the vulnerable, to place human compassion above royal protocol. So Sarah never hesitated to be her silent partner. She disliked camera attention, yet she was always there when Diana needed someone. During grueling tours, in unpredictable public appearances, Sarah was the observant eye, the ready hand that held Diana steady. In 1990 in Nepal, a humble but welcoming nation, the Princess of Wales appeared unadorned and unpolished. No diamonds, no glamour, just humility. While Western media still reeled at the image of a royal kneeling in a marketplace to hear villagers tell of landmine losses, Sarah as lady-in-waiting remained close behind, both upholding royal decorum and offering emotional support. Amid a sea of camera lenses pointed at Diana, Sarah quietly watched, remained vigilant, and most importantly ensured her sister never felt alone. Diana did not stop at AIDS. She took on the campaign to ban landmines with the International Committee of the Red Cross. Images of the princess walking through a minefield in Angola, clad in flak jacket with a resolute expression, became a powerful piece of positive media. Who would have believed that a woman once criticized for being emotionally unstable would dare to tread terrain so perilous that even heads of state would think twice? But for Diana, each step delivered a message. She was not just stepping on mine-scarred ground, she was stamping out the idea that royal women are mere decorations. She turned trauma into action. She turned palace isolation into a movement that bridged the world. And Sarah, though not in the spotlight, was always present as that steadfast shadow. There were nights when Diana wept over scandalous tabloids, and Sarah was the first to call with a reassurance. On long flights when Diana was too exhausted for public appearances, Sarah was the one carrying the handbag and restoring her sister's smile through simple, everyday chatter. "I don't need you there out of duty," Diana once wrote to Sarah in a handwritten letter. "I need you because you are home." Towards the end of her life, Diana became increasingly estranged from the world she had once belonged to. The monarchy could not understand a princess who wanted to become a normal mother, who dared to touch the poor without white gloves, who wanted to choose her own partner instead of following arranged plans. Sarah was among the few who maintained that human connection between Diana and the real world beyond royal life. Though there were differences and even tension at times, the sisterly bond between them remained an irreplaceable anchor during her darkest moments. Princess Diana never forgot she was a Spencer, and Sarah always reminded her of that. She didn't meddle deeply in Diana's choices, but she was always there as a moral compass. When Diana decided to withdraw from her official royal duties in 1996, Sarah was the one who quietly supported her, even though it unsettled the entire family. Because more than anyone else, Sarah knew Diana was never meant to be imprisoned within a gilded cage, and that the price of freedom sometimes was loneliness. But what pained Sarah the most was knowing that every good deed Diana undertook sprang from her innermost heart, and because that heart was so sensitive, so pure, it brought more pain upon her than any member of the royal family. The compassion Diana offered was not strategy or PR tools. It was truly flesh and blood. And when someone lives with genuine feeling in a world built on falsehoods, what happens? Sarah knows the answer, but she never dared to voice it aloud. Even later, as memories of Diana became increasingly idealized and the public gradually forgot the tears behind the glamour, Sarah remained silent, not because she had nothing to say, but because sometimes the highest form of respect is to quietly protect the memories that only family has the right to keep. Yet in Sarah's heart, one thing never changed. Diana was never just an icon. Her sister was a courageous, kind woman who deserved to be deeply loved. But then, everything Diana gave to the world, all her gestures, all her light ended in a single night, a fateful night in Paris, a night when humanity seemed to freeze in time. A night when Lady Sarah McCorquodale, the eldest sister, who had faithfully stood guard like a silent shield, received a chilling message of just 2 words: Diana, accident. On August 31st, 1997, Diana, with her boyfriend Dodi Fayed, the son of billionaire Mohammed Al Fayed, left the Ritz Hotel in a desperate attempt to escape paparazzi chasing them like starving beasts. The Mercedes crashed in the Pont de l'Alma tunnel, slamming into a concrete pillar. The horrific accident instantly claimed Dodi's life. Diana survived, but only for a few hours. Sarah, who was in England at the time, initially received news that her sister was injured. A fragile thread of hope flickered, but by 6 a.m. the next morning, everything collapsed. Pitié-Salpêtrière Hospital announced that Princess Diana had died of severe internal injuries. The heart of the people's princess had stopped beating, and Sarah's heart, the protector of her sister as if she were part of her own body, shattered as well. No words can capture that moment. Sarah, along with Prince Charles and their other sister, Lady Jane Fellows, immediately flew to Paris. They came not only to bring Diana's body home, they came as the last relatives strong enough to stand beside her. When Sarah entered the hospital's cold room and saw her sister's motionless body draped in white sheets, she didn't cry. The pain had already surpassed tears. Yet after death, the real nightmare began. Once the news broke, the world shook. The media ran amok. Crowds formed outside Buckingham Palace, at the gates of Kensington Palace, and across every street in England. They came not just to mourn, but to demand answers. Because something didn't add up. Something wasn't transparent. And from that moment, conspiracy theories sprouted like poison mushrooms after rain. Mohammed Al-Fayed was the first to voice them. He refused to believe the initial conclusion that the crash happened solely because driver Henri Paul was drunk. He insisted it was murder, a meticulously staged conspiracy. He pointed the finger at the culprit, Britain's MI6 intelligence agency. In his view, the royal family could not allow a divorcee dating a Muslim man to become the future king's stepmother. Sarah, though publicly silent, revealed a startling detail in the documentary memorializing her sister a few days before the crash. Diana called her from the Al-Fayed family yacht. Her sister's voice was tense, even panicked. "I feel like someone is watching me," Diana said. "I don't know who they are, but something feels very wrong." At the time, Sarah thought Diana was overwhelmed by media stress. She never imagined it would be their last conversation. Later, a handwritten letter from Diana to her trusted butler, Paul Burrell, was made public, deepening the horror. In it, Diana expressed suspicion that Charles, her ex-husband, was plotting a car accident to eliminate her and pave the way for Camila to enter officially. In that context, those words were no longer paranoia. They were chilling prophecy. In 2008, following mounting public pressure and demands from the Al-Fayed family, a 6-month inquiry was held in the UK Supreme Court. The hearings attracted millions of viewers every day. In the end, the jury concluded Diana's death resulted from the serious negligence of driver Henri Paul, combined with the unlawful pursuit of paparazzi. He was drunk, no seatbelt, excessive speed. But many refused to believe in even Sarah. She never publicly opposed the court's conclusion. But in every word she spoke, in every glance she gave, one could sense an unrelenting doubt. A woman like Diana, who was always cautious about her movements, who once told her close friend, "I would never die in an accident if I were the one holding the wheel." Why wasn't she wearing a seatbelt? Why was the driver changed at the last minute? Why were the security cameras in the tunnel suddenly not working? A series of unanswered questions. And with each passing year, as the memorials grew quieter, as Diana's name was slowly replaced by newer royal figures, Sarah continued to carry those questions like a wound that would never heal. She might never know the truth. But what haunted Sarah the most was not the conspiracy theories. It was the heartbreaking reality the sister she had once shielded, once led through the wreckage of a broken childhood, once protected inside a cold palace, had died alone, in the middle of the night, with no one familiar by her side. And that truth, whether the royal family accepted it or not, remains an indelible scar on the heart of Britain. The death of Princess Diana did not simply close a tragic chapter in the British monarchy. It opened a new journey for Lady Sarah McCorquodale, the eldest sister, the lifelong companion, and now the guardian of the flame that preserves the memory of one of the most beloved women of the 20th century. While Britain was still drowning in overwhelming grief, while millions stood for hours in the rain just to place a single flower outside the gates of Kensington Palace, Sarah quietly stepped forward to shoulder a responsibility no one else could bear, to ensure Diana's image would never be distorted, and more importantly, never be forgotten. In those chaotic days after the funeral, it was Sarah who represented the Spencer family in negotiating with the royal family over the details of the nationally televised farewell. She chose Elton John's Candle in the Wind. She accompanied her sister's casket, her hand resting gently on the hearse as if trying to hold on to a soul that had just left this world. And she was the one who stood at Westminster Abbey, speaking calmly but with searing pain, letting the world know Diana was not merely a princess suffocated by glittering illusions, but a mother, a woman drained by the coldness of power. But Sarah didn't stop there. She took on the role of president of the Diana, Princess of Wales Memorial Fund, a foundation created to carry on the charitable work her sister had begun. From 1998 to 2012, she tirelessly raised funds, built programs, and traveled to support humanitarian missions around the globe. The smiles of children affected by landmines in Angola, the hands of AIDS patients held tightly in refugee camps all bore the shadow of Diana, carried forward by the ever-restless heart of her eldest sister. Occasionally, Sarah appeared in public alongside her two nephews, William and Harry, especially during memorial events or the unveiling of Diana's statue. She always looked at them with gentle eyes, two pieces of her sister's soul, and did her best to nurture not only their love for their mother, but also the spirit of resistance Diana once embodied. Diana was a devoted mother, Sarah said in a rare interview, but people forget that she had to mother her children in an environment where emotions were monitored, and weakness was treated as an enemy. What has torn at Sarah's heart for decades is not simply that Diana died. It is the cruel truth that she who had protected and lifted her sisters since they were young was also the one who unwittingly opened the door that led Diana into the merciless labyrinth of royalty. In 1907, when she introduced Charles to Diana at Althorp, Sarah had no idea that this seemingly harmless moment would mark the beginning of a two-decade tragedy. "If I could go back, I would never have let her meet him," she confessed. Diana needed love, not a crown. That regret has haunted Sarah like a shadow ever since. Every time she reads an article about Camila, every time she sees Charles appearing beside his wife at royal events with a look of contentment, her heart aches. Because she knows if Diana were still alive, that place could have been her sister's, the one who endured more than anyone else, but who never truly found peace while she lived. Despite the heart-wrenching memories, Sarah still believes that Diana's legacy is immortal. No monarchy can erase the image of a woman reaching out to hold the hand of an AIDS patient, embracing an abandoned child, or walking barefoot through a minefield with unwavering determination in her eyes. No PR campaign can dim the love that the world continues to hold for their princess, a woman who did not need a throne to become eternal. William and Harry, though they have chosen different paths, have both tried to preserve that legacy in their own ways. William, with the composure of a future king, leads large-scale charitable endeavors in his mother's name. Harry, despite controversy surrounding his decision to step away from royal life, often refers to Diana as the greatest inspiration of his life. Regardless of how the world views them, to Sarah, those two boys remain living proof of Diana's everlasting love, a love unbound by royal protocol, nurtured instead by a mother's instinct. And if there is anything that brings Sarah the faintest smile when looking back on a past soaked in blood and tears, it is the image of millions still speaking Diana's name with a tone of reverence. They do not remember her for the title Princess of Wales. They remember her for how she made them feel heard, seen, and loved, even if only through a television screen or a brief encounter. Lady Sarah McCorquodale, the woman who witnessed Diana transform from a wounded girl into a global icon, now lives quietly in the English countryside of Lincolnshire. But with each passing day, She continues to carry that legacy like a sacred flame, not to relive sorrow, but to remind the world that a woman can lose everything and still conquer time if she holds on to compassion. And Diana, the people's princess, is the eternal proof of that truth. But perhaps what makes the name Diana forever haunting is not only her radiant beauty or the moving photographs that resurface with each passing year. It is the way she left this world suddenly, mysteriously, and shrouded in questions. Nearly 3 decades have passed, yet the wound named Paris on the night of August 31st, 1997 remains unhealed. Was it an accident or a meticulously planned conspiracy? That question, even now, hangs like a blade above the cold stone walls of the British monarchy. In a rare public appearance, Lady Sarah McCorquodale could not hide the bitterness in her eyes when speaking of her sister. She recalled the final phone call from Diana, placed from a luxurious yacht, though her voice was filled with fear. Diana said she felt someone was watching her. The feeling of being surrounded didn't come from paparazzi, but from an invisible force, a force that had haunted her ever since stepping into Buckingham Palace. And just days later, her sister lay lifeless in a crushed Mercedes. Her heart stopped at only 36. No one, not even Sarah, could truly believe it was just an accident. When the coffin draped in the Union Jack returned to London, when the world wept for a woman they had never met, Lady Sarah knew that this death was not the end. It was the beginning of a wave of questions, revelations, forgotten letters, and witnesses who refused to stay silent. Diana had once written to her butler, Paul Burrell, expressing her fear that her former husband was plotting to stage a car accident in order to clear the path for a life with Camilla. That fear was no longer hypothetical. It had become a haunting memory, especially as MI6 itself was suspected of monitoring Diana and Dodi. And Sarah, as the closest person to Diana during her final years, could not simply look away. There is a painful truth that Sarah once admitted: I didn't listen enough. I didn't see enough. And I trusted too much in what people said about royal life. It was that trust that led her to support the marriage between Diana and Charles. It was that trust that made her believe that a princess's title could bring happiness. But Sarah was wrong, and the price of that mistake was the life of her beloved sister. Diana, the girl who once played in the fields of Sandringham. The woman who said, my heart belongs to the people, left behind a legacy no one can replace. But it is also a tragedy left unresolved, a life torn between adoration and abandonment, a mother pulled between maternal love and royal duty, a wife who lived in the looming shadow of a third person whose name was never formally acknowledged, and a woman hunted until her final breath. Lady Sarah doesn't tell her story to stir scandal. She doesn't wish to revive the wounds that William and Harry are trying to heal. But she knows that if she doesn't speak, those truths will be buried beneath the layers of glittering fantasy that the monarchy works so hard to construct. I don't want Diana to become just a cold statue, she said. I want people to remember my sister as a real person, someone who loved, who hurt, and who lived with all her courage. Today, as images of William and Harry appear at various memorial events for their mother, as the statue of Princess Diana stands tall in Kensington Garden. Sarah watches from afar, her eyes still glistening with unfinished grief. She knows that no matter how much the world changes, the questions surrounding Diana's death will continue to echo, because the truth has never been fully answered. And justice, if it exists, is still waiting outside the palace walls. Diana was a light but also a warning, a symbol but also a victim. Her story is not merely one of a broken love or a tragic accident. It is an indictment of a system that once sacrificed a human being in the name of prestige. A reminder that in a world where media, power, and control intersect like sharpened blades, compassion is the most fragile thing of all. And so, Sarah keeps speaking, with her husky voice, with eyes that have seen both splendor and ruin. She urges the world, do not forget Diana, not as a fairy tale princess, but as a real woman, a sister, a mother, a symbol of empathy and courage who left this world with far too much left unsaid. Diana's death is a question mark. But those like Sarah who keep her memory vividly alive have turned that question mark into a warning for the entire world. That behind every crown lies a cost, and behind every princess's smile, there may be an ocean of tears.